I'm going to try something new and read Hard Things in Beautiful Places. This is a piece I tried to post a long time ago, but technical difficulties, which is me every day. So this was written the day after the latest inauguration. For some context, you'll see some of this is like out of date. So here we go. This wasn't an inauguration. An inauguration is a formal beginning. This is a tale as old as racism and patriarchy. It's a reminder, a threat. It is more of the same, and it is our destruction. The first time I remember being sexually assaulted, I was 3 or 4. I know because of where we lived. I know where we lived because I still smell it, taste it, still flinch, still freeze, still hide, still. I am 38 years old. It seems lost on the GOP that sexual assault has very little to do with sex. Part of why it feels like a second assault when it's called as such, like it's one bad thing that happened, beginning and end. I'm 38 years old. The first time I remember being sexually assaulted, it was my father who was the perpetrator. Same guy who told me I could tell him anything. Same guy that told me he loved me unconditionally. Same guy that said he'd kill anyone who messed with me in the way he had, well, messed with me. Same guy who openly told me I was his favorite. Same guy whose reflection I see when I look in the mirror every morning. Same guy who taught your kids. Same guy who was an elder at your church. Same guy who has marched in advocacy parades against sexual violence. Same guy who you send me emails about, telling me how lucky I am. Same guy having sleepovers with his grandkids, and same guy whose pension I pay with my taxes, and you do yours. Because life is complex and people are complex, maybe you can't imagine having a brother, a son, a sister, niece, friend, boss, whomever that would do that. And maybe that's on purpose. Maybe grooming is real because it is well documented throughout the history of human behavior. Maybe imagine that you were groomed by the people that brought you into this world, or the people who benefit from altering your perception of reality. Maybe. I didn't tell my mom. In my first of multiple memories, she was there, until she wasn't. Until the bathroom fan was on to block out the sound, shower running. Locked in, locked out. I can hear the shower, the bathroom fan. I was maybe 3, maybe 4. I can hear the sound of her not choosing me. As I type this, whole parts of my body turn numb. I am 38 years old. I have never met a stranger, and I have always been this way. I used to purposefully run away from my mom in public so that I could go mingle. But when I was 6, I quit talking. The only thing I would say was, I'm sorry, or nothing at all. I just stopped. I have no idea how long this lasted. It feels to me like at least a couple of months, long enough for my parents to take note who were ones for taking note of me. They brought me to their church where a pastor I had no relationship with laid hands on me alone in his office, and he prayed over me. The conclusion? I had sinned against God by not fulfilling his calling on my life. Basically, I had been cursed. I was 6. When I was around 11 years old, the perpetrator was my pediatrician, an appointment I attended alone. This time I told my mom. I'd learned so much since I was the toddler, but I didn't know as much about my mom or my dad as I thought. When I worked up the courage to say something, my mom was sitting in the living room. Before I finished one sentence, I saw what I had seen when I was 3, 4, my mom's back. She said nothing, stood up, walked away. I can still feel her chair's fabric against the back of my thighs as I watched her walk. I'm 38 years old. In middle school, I cold called numbers out of the white pages to try to find a doctor for me and for my siblings. My mom had continued making appointments for my siblings with a doctor who had abused me, Dr. Holly. Most any doctor's appointment has the potential of sending me into an all-out panic. I am 38 years old. It was shortly after this that I stood at the pulpit in my church and signed a contract with my perpetrator, my father, that I would not have sex before marriage. I signed a contract, they'd call it a covenant, at his church, making a promise that my body would stay faithful to him who had sexually assaulted me until God and he deemed I could give my body to another man. I never knew my body was mine. I never knew anything was mine. My life, my will was God's. Anything else was sin. And my body, that belonged to men. It's at the same church where I attended a class called Preparing for Adolescence, a book written by James Dobson, a white Christian man who spent a career focusing on the quote-unquote traditional family, but who loudly supported our current president throughout all of his sexual scandals, misconduct, and boastings. A man who has used his platform, built his platform, on tirelessly oppressing anyone who isn't a straight, white Christian male. In this class, I heard that my vagina was created by God for its effective ownership and in service to one man. I was told that if I wasn't a virgin, that no man would want me. I was told that if I used a tampon, I was no longer a virgin. I was told that if I denied my future husband sex, that he would have no choice but to cheat on me, because men need what men need. I was told this by white men, Christian men. I was told this as a survivor of sexual assault perpetrated by a man who they would later name an elder of their church. Same church in which I had promised my body to the man who, in their words, stole my virginity and my chance at any relationship in the future. The man who at this point had taken to calling me whore. As a teenager, I again brought up Dr. Hawley with my former pediatrician, with my mom, who told me that she had heard of other patients that he had touched, but that she had assumed I was lying to corroborate their story. These are, of course, girls I was just now hearing about and had never met. On other occasions, my mom would tell me I was too honest. In other words, it bothered her the way I wouldn't lie. And so life went on. In 2015, I reported my father, Joe, for sexual abuse and confronted my mom on the same topic. In a matter of months after, I had lost nearly every member of my extended family on both sides. All of my siblings, both of my parents. In 2016, I was attacked walking through a neighborhood. The man had me in a chokehold on someone's front lawn. Trying to rip my pants down, I fought back. I yelled while I could, and eventually I did scare him off. One person came out of a business across the street. Alex, and my boyfriend at the time, encouraged me to call the cops, and I did. I was promised that a female officer would come with a male officer to take pictures of my body at my apartment. That did not happen. One male officer showed up and scoffed when I said he was not invited in. It's important to note that at this time I had on another occasion been illegally strip searched and cavity searched by a police officer in a nearby county twice. This officer asked me what I was wearing. He asked me why I was walking down the sidewalk. He asked me if I had headphones on. He asked me where I was coming from. He asked me if I had been drinking. He asked a lot about me. The cop asked very little about the perpetrator, but found lots of creative ways to conclude that he was Mexican. Though I insisted that I had no reason to believe that this was the case, I told him everything I knew about the person, as much of a description as I could give. I told him that the perpetrator said nothing to me throughout the entire interaction. I was told, not asked, that I probably just didn't understand him because he spoke Spanish. I told the officer that I speak Spanish, and I stated numerous times that I wanted the report to reflect what I had shared, nothing about ethnicity, since I had no idea what the person's ethnicity was. Later, when I asked to see the report, the suspect is listed as Mexican. It was on my 36th birthday that Roe v. Wade was overturned, ensuring that each and every man perpetrating sexual violence against my person retained and regained control over my body, including the man who delivered me on the same day, 36 years prior, including the father that gets more votes than me in that he illegally votes for other women in his life. When I heard, I rushed to a toilet and I threw up. I did again at the inauguration. I'm 38 years old. I recently worked for a government agency where I was interviewed for an additional job to join the jiu-jitsu instructor team. In receiving the position, I was sent to an intensive training. I thought so many times while at this training, every girl, queer individual, person of color, and woman needs this training. How sad. Every girl, queer individual, person of color, and woman needs this training. They do. Then in a scrimmage with two managers of this government agency, the instructor and manager got and sustained an erection. I was the only woman. They were both my superiors, and it was mandatory that I attend. Both men work with vulnerable youth who are most often court-ordered to receive their services. Both men denied this happen. Both men have wives and families and are friends with one another's wives and families. I filed a formal complaint and their stories differed from mine. No surprise. I left the team when the perpetrator decided he would not be resigning. Not long after, another manager at the same government agency pulled a group of staff members into an impromptu training where he shared what he had been teaching the kids about PREA. PREA is the Prison Rape Elimination Act, and as far as I'm concerned, all kids need to know about it is what their rights are, so that they can legally protect themselves during and after time spent incarcerated. But this manager went on to say that he had spoken to a group of incarcerated youth, telling them that if they end up in prison because of their bad choices and are sent to be with other quote-unquote bad people, who is really to blame if they are raped? I spoke up in the meeting and I said that the rapist is to be blamed 100% of the time. There was some pushback from the adult in a position of power. There was some pushback from the manager and I walked out of the room. I could not sit by while an adult in a position of power led kids to believe that their sexual assault of any kind was their fault, the way I had been taught when I myself was a child. I reported this interaction to the person overseeing the department. Then the vote happened. Then we as a country decided that being a perpetrator of sexual assault was still esteemed in this country. We voted to give a nod to sexual predators, ensuring their safety, doubling down on the oppressed victims, including children. And people said it wouldn't change anything in my world because they come from a place about thinking about their world. I think about our world, and I was right. I had been trained. Days later, I was fired without cause. Because I was on probation for the first year of my employment, they did not need to give a reason. I knew the reason. I still pay both managers' wages with my taxes, and so do you. There are signs up all over in this facility saying, if you see something, say something, but a very clear message was sent to my coworkers. If you see something and you say something, be prepared to lose your livelihood and your health benefits. I want to be perfectly clear. This is nowhere near a complete list of the instances in which I have been personally and profoundly affected by the sexual misconduct or outright abuse at the hands of men, all of which, to my knowledge, are citizens of this country. Except the attacker on the street, who I do not know. To my knowledge, all of these perpetrators are not only citizens of this country, but receive their pay or retirement based on performing their jobs with community members, including, if not exclusively, minors. I want to be perfectly clear that I am privileged. I am white, and I have received years and years of therapy. And this is my experience at 38 years old. If you voted for our current president, you voted for this to continue. If you go to get drinks with my parents and hug them at holiday parties, you are complicit in allowing this behavior. If you have emailed, texted, called me to tell me how good I had it and how wonderful my parents are, you are not only complicit, but you have emboldened perpetrators of sexual violence against children. And to those who say I should be able to put this aside and remain friends, friendly, subdued, I wish to God that I had ever had the privilege of feeling that protected, that safe. It's not just one bad guy at the top, but when we put one bad guy at the top, it lets perpetrators big and small know that we are unconcerned with protecting the innocent, unconcerned with justice, unconcerned with protecting anything outside the status quo of the privileged elite. It gives the go-ahead to get off and get ahead on the backs of the oppressed, often in Jesus' name, who was very clear about children and very clear about his purpose. He quoted the Old Testament prophet Isaiah when he stated in the synagogue and in your Bibles in Luke 4, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of our Lord's favor." And it was in this vein that Jesus began his ministry. During Jesus' ministry on earth, it is recorded that he became angry exactly one time. Matthew 21 depicts Jesus entering Jerusalem saying, "Behold, your king is coming to you humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of the beast of burden." And when he gets to the temple, he starts turning tables, admonishing the people within his own religion. And to quote Matthew 21, he drove out all who sold and bought in the temple, and he overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold pigeons. He said to them, "It is written, my house shall be called a house of prayer, but you have made it a den of robbers." He immediately left the religious to heal the afflictions of the deaf and disabled and to be with children. As a reminder, Christian is translated from the original Greek to mean little Christ or follower of Christ. How many at the inauguration would have left their money and followed Christ to help the oppressed? How many little Christ left the rallies where our president mocked people with disabilities, oppressed minorities? How many left rallies where Christianity was bought and sold? Because I can think of many events walked out on by queer people, people of color, women, the oppressed. I can't count the number of flashbacks I've had this week. And I can't count the number of people praising not just God, but the violent perpetrators that condone the continuance of a life lived in complete antithesis to the life of Christ, in the name of Christ. By and large, children who are sexually assaulted or abused by white Christian men. Trans folks are an easy scapegoat for adults too scared to be held accountable in accordance to the Messiah they vowed is their cornerstone and their purpose. Jesus ate with sex workers. The Pharisees and Sadducees were too busy acting out religion to attend the meals. And if you are unfamiliar with Pharisees and Sadducees, look no further than the person that was just elected and those he is assigning office. It is personal. Every relationship I have ever had, every nightmare I have woken up from, as well as those I still haven't. Every time I've been physically paralyzed by the horror of memory that comes with cPTSD, every therapy session that I have paid for, every night I can't stand to sleep in a bed, every family member that I have lost is a direct result of the continuance and allowance of deplorable behavior encouraged by the man that you elected. You have a right to your opinion and to your vote. But if you use that right to take away my rights, you are not my friend. It's cliche at this point to say that you can't heal in the same environment that harmed you. I choose healing. I choose myself. I spent most of my life not knowing that I had a self, not knowing I had a choice. I will not make my life harder so that you can more easily oppress the sanctity of life that you claim while crushing it right out of my soul. And to the queer individual, the people of color, the women, the children, the traumatized, you are not alone. If you find this helpful or know anyone that would, please feel free to share it, because I have no business in the temple when there are children that need fed and oppressed that need set free. Amen.